Okay, Joe, welcome back. Yes.
Okay, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you again to the Jewish Center and to the Avot for inviting me to lead these three sessions. Pirkei Avot. Thank you to all who are coming to the third of the three sessions, whether you're here in person or you're attending Zoom, or if you're listening to it some other time. Welcome. So whether you attended the session or it's the first time that you attended. At the first session, I provided an introduction to Pirkei Avot and an introduction to my book on Pirkei Avot, which is right here. Show it to everybody. Those of you who have not seen it, it's called Reflections on Pirkei Avot, not just what my Rebbe taught me. Those who are here can purchase a copy at the end of the session. Those who are not here can purchase a copy at the website, which is joerosenstein.com. Just that, joerosenstein.com. No dot in between Joe and Rosenstein. And I'm not going to reintroduce the book because I talked about it before, but I will reintroduce Pirkei Avot and the ethics of the fathers. In case someone is here today, someone is listening that hasn't attended any of the previous two sessions. So, and it's also a review for those who've been here before. Since our last class, I had a birthday. So the reason I mentioned that is I got as a birthday present this blue jacket, which is different from the blue jacket that I've worn the previous 2 days, which has on it a quote from Pirkei Avot. The quote is about a Tarfon 221, Mishnah 221, which says, "Lo alecha hamlacha legmor." It's not your responsibility to finish the work, and neither do you have permission to step away from it. And in my talks about it, I don't know whether I mentioned that here before. Last class was 3 weeks ago, before that was 5 weeks ago, so my memory doesn't extend that far back. But I mentioned that Rabbi Tarfon was instrumental in my writing this book because at different times in COVID, I was saying to myself, what am I doing writing a book? I'm almost 80 years old, and all of my, all sorts of people my age are falling into COVID. I'll never finish it. And at that point, I happened to be working on chapter 2, and I read what Rabbi Tarfon said. He said, don't worry about finishing, just keep working. So I felt he was talking to me and telling me to keep going. So I did. So recognizing that was an important Mishnah in Avot, someone engraved a shirt with that quote. Of course, on the screen you can't see it because it's backwards. But you can all see it here in the letter of the small, but nevertheless, I told the person who sent it to me that I would wear it today. So it seems like I'm joking. So anyways, Avot is a small section of the Mishnah, which was compiled in roughly the year 200 of the Common Era, just 1800 years ago, by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, based on initial work done by Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Meir, and others in the previous generations. Avot is the only portion of the Mishnah which doesn't have any halacha, which means it doesn't have rules and regulations. Instead, it contains ethical teachings, which would be our focus today, but also advice to judges and would-be judges, advice to Torah scholars and would-be Torah scholars, and also aphorisms appropriate for the general population. The teachers cited in Avot span 500 years, almost 300 before the Common Era to about 200 in the Common Era. A lot was happening during that time. There was life under Persian rule and under Greek rule and under Roman rule. There was conflicts between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. There was conflicts between the schools of Hillel and Shammai. And there was the rise of Christianity. There were the rebellions of the Maccabees, which was successful, and of Kochba, which was dramatically unsuccessful. The Holy Temple and the city of Jerusalem were destroyed by the Romans in the year 70 of the Common Era, and the Holocaust that took place 60 years later, also by the Romans, was second only to the Holocaust of our times. None of these historical happenings are mentioned in Pirkei Avot, nor perhaps hardly at all in the entire Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, his followers, and their descendants, optimistically focused building a new Judaism, and didn't want to be distracted by incoming events. Rabbi Yochanan had been smuggled out of Jerusalem before it was destroyed, the coffin, and received permission from Vespasian, the Roman general, to found an academy in Avot. The efforts by Rabbi Yochanan and his followers, beginning in the year 70 and culminated in the convocation of the Mishnah 130 years later, and Rabbi Yehuda HaNassi. In the first section of this three-part course, I presented an overview of Pirkei Avot, an introduction to the big picture approach to Pirkei Avot. That's an important feature of the book. In that book, I provide comments on each Mishnah, but also discuss together those Mishnayot that have common themes. So I have included 10 separate essays on theme chapters that bring together all the Mishnayot that deal with each specific theme. In the second session, I discussed the three major developments that took place in Judaism during this period. First, the concept of the oral Torah. Secondly, the adoption of the belief in the Olam Haba, to come. And third, the rise of rabbinic scholarship. And today, as I said, I will discuss the ethical teachings of Pirkei Avot. Now, even though it's called Ethics of the Fathers, Pirkei Avot is not a book of ethics, although it does contain many ethical teachings. The book on Jewish ethics should talk about all of the various kinds of situations in which ethical teachings arise. Yet there are many such situations that are not addressed at all in Pirkei. Some examples are social justice, sexual relations, business practices, modesty, conventional morality, not discussed very much in Pirkei Avot. A book on Jewish ethics should describe the character traits that are possessed by an ethical person and how one can achieve those traits. But the dozen or so of the principles enumerated in later books of Musar, books whose focus is on Jewish ethics, are not mentioned here. Although Musar, of course, draws its inspiration from Pirkei Avot. The book on Jewish ethics should highlight and build upon the important ethical statements in the Bible. So among those ethical statements are those in the holiness code of Leviticus 19, which tell us that we should be holy because our God is holy. So I'm going to ask you to read those aloud. Pass these down, one please. And each person reads one, and we go around the room. We can read them all in two classes. Give a brief pause between each statement so that everybody can think about it for a moment. And then we can discuss them all together afterwards. So would you like to start?
Leave the corners of your field and the fallen sheaves for the poor and the stranger.
Don't steal. Don't steal from, cheat, or defraud other people.
Don't swear falsely in the name of God, lest you desecrate the name of God.
Don't withhold a worker's wages until the next day.
Don't insult someone who is deaf, or broadly, don't insult someone who is not present and cannot hear or respond to your words. And still more broadly, don't insult anyone.
Don't put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. More broadly, don't mislead someone who can't see that you're misleading them.
Don't corrupt judgment in favor of a poor person or a powerful person. Judge everyone fairly.
Don't spread gossip about other people.
Don't stand by idly when someone else is in danger.
Don't hate someone in your heart. Let him know what wrong he has done. Don't seek revenge and don't bear a grudge.
Love your neighbor like yourself.
Stand before those who are old and show deference to those who are aged.
Don't treat the stranger badly, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt.
Don't falsify your measures of length, weight, or volume.
The world is built upon deeds of kindness.
Do justice, have a passion for loving kindness, and walk humbly with your God.
So any comments or questions about these things? Yes,
Well, they're both big and small.
Right.
And that's striking.
that's striking. They're
It's
not- they're not
micro
all-
and macro.
Right, they're not all the same rainbow.
Right.
Some are very, very, very specific, some are very, very broad. Okay, so which ones, what's an example of broad one?
Love your neighbor like yourself.
Love your neighbor
Yeah.
like yourself. So that's a very broad statement. And that one reason why it's hard to interpret is because who is your neighbor? Does that mean everyone in the world? Or does it mean your small community, or is it family? So that's one question about that one. And the other question is, what does it mean to love somebody? What is actually involved in that? So those are two very broad issues which are not stated explicitly. Now, what's one that's very specific?
Don't hate a person in your heart. Let him know what he has done wrong.
Right, it's very, very specific. Any there that are unclear what they mean?
The world is built upon deeds of kindness.
Yes, so so what does that mean? What does that mean? So I guess we all have a sense of what that means, that it means that if people don't act in a civil way to one another, don't take care of one another, then things fall apart. That's a very clear message that they have. That's throughout. That's a very broad thing, because it's not clear what exactly you're supposed to do. But on the other hand, it's a very clear message. Others of these that attract your attention one way or another. I'd like to know more about it. Ask a question. Say something about it. Yes.
I mean, for me, one that I think is like very difficult is the one, don't hate someone in your heart, let him know what he has done wrong, what wrong he has done.
Yeah, so what's the, you find that difficult because.
Well, just
Yeah.
not difficult to understand, but just that it's something that it's very difficult to carry out.
It's very difficult to carry out.
And,
Yes.
and what's more, I think it's a pre-modern disposition, because although even then one could hate the Roman emperor, who one was unlikely to meet. But, more generally, you are aware of people whose opinions you dislike intensely, and you're never going to have a chance to tell them what's wrong, because you're never going to meet them.
Right. So you could yell at the screen.
Right.
Yell at the screen. Okay, so some are hard to do.
I think the first one, the leave the corners of your field, that's inviting someone onto your property.
Yes.
And without your supervision, you just leave it there and they will take what they have to take.
It's
And
very-
I think that's a very difficult thing to.
Well, I assume that this was actually done.
Yes, I
In
think so.
ancient times, that they left the corners of the field.
Yeah.
But if the sheep fell, then it was supposed to be left before, and they probably followed this.
Yeah.
Seems to be no question about this as being something to do, and it's not hard to do. But it's, as you say, it's use that somewhere on your property,
And you're not in charge of it.
and you're not in charge of it.
Yeah.
Well, the idea was that all land belongs to God, and it's yours only as temporary measure. Yes.
I see a problem in that the size of the corners is not defined. So that a person could start in presumably, we assume there are four corners to a field roughly. If you start at a corner and keep going until you pick clean 1/4 of the whole field, and three other people do the same thing, each taking another corner, the farmer has no fruit or vegetables left.
Right, I see, so corner is not defined, so the question was, and I don't know the answer to the question, but does the Talmud go into discussions of what exactly it means to be the quarter of the field? Yes.
But you're leaving part of your field unharvested, and that's what people can take. It's not that they come in first and take from you.
That's right. They have to take this left over. So, but then the question is, how much should you be going? And that's the same question you asked. Now,
I have one question.
yes,
In modern times, we don't pay workers daily a lot, so,
yes.
people get weekly checks or monthly
Yeah.
checks or quite, so.
Well, we live in a different world.
Right.
Some lived on the
Mhm.
proceeds of that day. There's one session, one place in the company where it says that anyone who has food, not only for today, but for tomorrow is wealthy.
Mhm.
So that was considered a standard of wealth. Now, what's interesting about all these statements is that almost none of them are mentioned in Pirkei Avot. So in other words, Pirkei Avot does not, as I mentioned earlier, build on what's in the Torah. And they're not mentioned because they're ignored, but because they are fundamental, and therefore each one is assumed by the studies. So we just go on from there. Okay. So now, so given these observations, it is sort of hard to see the Pirkei Avot as being designed as a textbook Jewish ethics. It doesn't cover all the topics, it doesn't tell you how to implement it, it doesn't build on what's in the Bible. So how did it come to be? Well, one could imagine the editors interviewing each of the great teachers and extracting one or two items from each interview for their compilation. But of course, it didn't happen that way because the contributors to chapters 2 through 5 of Avot spans 4 or 5 generations. So you couldn't just go ask them, give me an ethical principle that you are spreading. So what happened was the editors gathered together statements made by their teachers and their teachers' teachers that they believed were significant, but would not be otherwise included in the Mishnah because they didn't fit into any of the 6 halachic categories which are outlined by the 6 titles of the 6 volumes of Mishnah. So the statements that they collected were sometimes organized thematically, sometimes chronologically, sometimes randomly. Ethical teachings were sometimes adjacent to judicial teachings, sometimes adjacent to teachings which were general observations of life. Sometimes earlier teachings appear later in the book than later teachings which appear earlier. That's often very striking as you ask, you're going through here to come to this Mishnah and you say, gee, this reminds me of that Mishnah back there. I wonder how that Mishnah back there influenced this one. Well, you need to know that this one actually was before that one. It's the other way around. So, yeah, it's still, so the things weren't arranged, ethical issues weren't organized systematically, certainly not. Yet it still does try to make sense to try to find patterns in these teachings, to extract from them the ethical issues that are important to these important teachers of the 1st and 2nd centuries of the era. So I'm going to hand you out momentarily some sheets which contain 90 statements, which are in the current version of my attempts to formulate the ethical principles that are found in modern terms. They differ from the actual text in several ways. First of all, they're not simple translations. but there are interpretations of what the sages said. The reason for that is that it's very hard to tell what a simple translation would be, because they are very often spoke in generalities. So, for example, one which we will discuss perhaps in more detail is Hillel says, "Ena nili nili," try not for myself, please for me. What does that mean? So you have to give some, so it's not a simple translation. Secondly, the statements that I'm going to give you are expanded in accordance with the interpretations that are presented in the discussion of the Mishnah Yom and Mishnah Pirkei in my book. Both the interpretations of the traditional commentators and my own interpretations. The third way in which they differ from what's in Pirkei Avot is that they're all presented as imperative statements, as directions for how we should behave, rather than as generalizations. So this list of ethical principles, which I'm going to share with you, is therefore a very personalized list. Others may disagree both with the statements on this list and on how they're expressed. They are presented here in order of their appearance in Pirkei Avot. After each ethical principle is the number of the Mishnah in which it appears. And discussions of each ethical principle occurs in my book in the Mishnah in which they appear. So I'm going to again ask you to go around the room and read this entire list, each person reading one ethical principle and its number. And the next person should pause for maybe 5 seconds, 8 seconds, so that everyone has an opportunity to contemplate briefly what each principle means. Please remember the numbers of the principles that you would most like to discuss, so that we can afterwards discuss the ones that you want. Okay, so those listen to this afterwards. Will not have those on Zoom now, which apparently know it is. Will not have this list, but nevertheless, you can hear the list and think about those ethical principles which you find most interesting or challenging. An earlier version of this list occurs in my book. I've been working on a second edition of the book and an ebook version, both of which book will be published later this year. However, the version of this list, in the current version of the book, is a pretty good approximation to the list that we use today. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so again, would you start?
Perform acts of loving kindness regularly so that you do your part to sustain the world. 1, 2.
You don't need to read the mission.
Okay.
Do what is right without any expectation of a reward.
Give every person the benefit of the doubt.
Choose your words carefully to minimize the possibility that they will be misunderstood and lead others astray.
Promote peace, not discord among other people.
Love all people and thereby serve as a role model for good conduct.
Avoid self-promotion, for it often undermines your reputation rather than influencing.
8, continue to learn and grow throughout your life.
9, be sure to take care of your own needs, both physical and spiritual, and be an advocate for yourself.
10. Be sure to take care of the needs of others, both physical and spiritual, and be an advocate for them as well.
11, take responsibility for your ethical development and for your ethical treatment for other people.
12. Take responsibility for your own education and for the development of your religious practice.
Don't delay. Whatever challenge you have to face, there is no better time to begin than the present.
14. Transform your commitments into words and your words into actions.
Greet other people cheerfully. A smile goes a long way.
Make sure that your learning is reflected in your deeds.
Be careful about what you say and consequently speak less.
18. Follow a path in your life that will enable you to wear your deeds proudly, and so that your pride will be shared and validated both by other people and by God.
19. Work selflessly to address the needs of your community.
20. Make God's will your own will.
21. Be a part of the Jewish community, not apart from the community.
22, don't give up on the Jewish community. Work to make it true to its beliefs and ideals.
23. Do not take for granted that you will always be an ethical person. Devote yourself continually to pursuing your ethical goals and to asking yourself whether your actions are consistent with those goals.
Do not judge other people until you have been in their place. And since you cannot have been in their place, you should not be judging them.
25. Make every effort to ensure that the meaning of your words is clear.
Make time for Torah study. If you think that you don't have time for it now, then you will also not have time for it in the future.
27, assign high priority to your spiritual needs. What seems most urgent is not always the most important.
In order to learn, you must overcome your shyness so that you ask questions and engage in discussions.
29. Have the courage to stand up for your principles, to be a mensch, even where no one else is a mensch, and to step up to act when action is needed.
30. Do acts of tzedakah to help bring peace in the world.
31. Avoid excessive pride. Remember that your accomplishments are due in large part to the skills and qualities and opportunities that you have been given.
32. Have a positive outlook. Focus on the positive aspects of each situation and not on its negative aspects.
33, feel compassion for all of God's creatures.
34. Let the honor of your chaver be as dear to you as your own.
Find ways of releasing your anger before it takes control of you.
36. If you must show anger, do it when you are calm and centered.
Turn to God, to holiness, to wholeness each day, as if it were your last.
38. Let the financial well-being of your chaver be as dear to you as your own.
39. Let all your actions be for the sake of heaven, that they may be not only for your own benefit, but to serve a higher purpose as well.
40. Don't give up on yourself. You can be the good person that you imagine yourself to be.
41. You may not be able to complete an important and substantial task, but you are not free to abandon your efforts.
42. When you are high and mighty, remember that you are but dust and ashes.
43. When you are low and dejected, remember that the world was created just for you.
44, pray for the well-being of your government and of all those who have an influence over your life.
45. Include spiritual content like words of Torah in every conversation.
46. Remember that all you have, that all you are, comes from God.
47. Be grateful for all you have, for all that you have comes from God.
Approach Jewish learning with reverence and recognize the value of the teachings of Judaism.
49, make sure that your good deeds are at least as prominent as your own.
50, treat every person with respect.
51, receive every person joyfully.
52, to acquire wisdom, listen actively to the words of the wise.
53, remember that God loves each one of us.
54, use the teachings of the Torah as a blueprint for your own life.
55, remember that you have the freedom to choose the path that you follow. Choose life rather than death, both physically and spiritually. Choose to do good rather than to do evil.
56, make a habit of doing good deeds regularly in order to build positive traits into your character.
Be open to learning from whoever has something to teach you.
58. Learn to control your inappropriate desires and inclinations, particularly your anger.
Be happy with and grateful for what you have.
60, focus your efforts on honoring all people, not in gaining honor for yourself.
61, run toward a mitzvah, act ethically with enthusiasm.
62, run away from a transgression. One moral lapse leads to another.
63, treat every person and everything in God's world as if it has value.
64, strive for humility, since a natural human tendency is to seek honor. Joe,
Yeah.
65.
65, right.
65.
Not desecrate the name of God by behavior that reflects badly on God, the Torah, or on the Jewish people.
66, if you are recognizably Jewish, then you must be careful not to behave in a way that will allow others to generate or reinforce negative attitudes about the Jewish people or about the God in whom we believe.
Honor each person at a higher level than what you think they merit.
68. Strive to acquire the crown of a good name by earning a good reputation, accomplishing praiseworthy deeds, serving as a role model for others, and trying consistently to do what is right.
Upon meeting people, be the first to extend greeting.
70, if a person is in a stressful situation, assess the situation carefully from the other person's perspective before you decide to intervene.
71, if a person is in a stressful situation, once the level of stress has been reduced, provide the other person with the understanding, the sympathy, the support, and the love that they need in order to better deal with their difficult situation.
72, do not rejoice at the misfortune of your enemy.
73, don't judge other people by external appearances or by first impressions.
74, do not let yourself become addicted to jealousy, lust, or the desire for honor, since those, like other addictions, remove you from the world.
75. If you want to be a mature participant in learned and other discussions, then you need to learn and practice the code of behavior that is expected of mature participants in such discussions.
76, try to avoid becoming angry, even if you have cause to become angry. And if you do become angry, allow yourself to be easily passive.
77, help those who need assistance and encourage others to do the same.
78. When engaged in a discussion, try to stay focused on seeking the truth and promoting your understanding and carrying out of God's will, however you understand God, and not on winning an argument or scoring points in some philosophical game.
79. Be a disciple of our father Abraham. Have a positive outlook, a humble spirit, and a moderate appetite.
Seek to do God's will with eagerness and enthusiasm.
81, find a way to live in Torah, make study of Torah an integral part of your life.
82, make the effort. Without effort, there can be no success.
83, try not to take offense when you are criticized or even insulted. Try not to engage with the attacker, but if necessary, defend yourself by responding calmly and deliberately to what the other person has claimed.
That person is
84.
84.
Thank you. Keep your cool. Move to a spiritual place before your anger emerges.
85, practice humility by recognizing that in the essence you are no different from other people, and that at the same time you are a part of something much greater than yourself.
86, live a modest lifestyle in terms of clothing, food, housing, and possessions.
87, take advantage of the opportunity to attain great spiritual heights that the Torah affords.
88, honor and respect each person who taught you something of value.
89, share in bearing the burdens of other people.
90, show respect for others by giving them credit for what they have said and done.
So, any comments about the reading of all of these one after another? Yes,
These are more specific than the Pirkei Avot, I agree. But we've already violated the very introduction. We handed it, you passed it out,
Yes.
you read them, but right at the top it says, not for distribution.
yes, and notice that, I wrote that out by hand on each one. Because, I would rather
Copies.
it not be out there until it's actually published. There are a number of reasons which I can't
So- So it could have been made more specific.
Sorry,
It could have been made more specific.
it could have made more specific.
So it's a good teaching, except that it wasn't specific enough.
Sorry.
And also, number 57,
Before we look at the individual ones, I
okay,
just want to get a sense of whether you thought this was a worthwhile activity to
Yeah,
just
yeah,
read them
absolutely.
like that straight out.
Yeah.
Yes,
Very much so.
Very moving.
It's very moving. It's
Very moving.
Yes,
Very moving.
yeah, I find that as well. Somehow, it's like reading a list, but nevertheless, this list, each item has some value, just the different ones of us, we react to different items. But somehow reading them all together gives us a picture, sort of big picture of the ethics that they consider.
Hearing each one in somebody else's voice
Yes,
is also very effective. A list is sort of a one thing, but if you do it like this, I think each one is more meaningful.
yes.
Well, I think sort of following on that, or maybe preceding that, having read them aloud was much more impactful than if I just sat here and read through the list.
Yes, that's absolutely the case. And when I read it to myself, I read it aloud, therefore, not aloud along. Since I read it Any other comments on that? Well, on that? Yes.
Um. When will we ever learn?
That was exactly.
If only we
If
could
only.
absorb these into our being, it's a very easy way that would be wonderful, but that doesn't happen. Yes. You got-
Well, I've spoken to go ahead. Jim.
What I was gonna say is, on the other hand, besides reading them aloud, when I read them by myself, I read one and I stop and I think about it for a while. And when I've processed it enough, then I move on to the next one, so I think there's virtue in doing it both ways.
Yes,
Absolutely,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Absolutely. So actually, in the book, what I suggest is that, people read them, slowly, perhaps just one a day.
That's what I was
And
thinking.
focus on that
Right,
one
a
for
day,
that
that's
day.
like a
And so
mantra.
over the course of 93 months, I'm reminded that all my pills come with 90.
They're going to 100, I just read.
So maybe we should be treated the same way. I didn't intend for it to be 90, it just happened. 90, yes.
Well, what struck me also is how much you have to, in order to fulfill this, it's better to live in a community that's trying to fulfill it. There are so many cultural influences fighting against
Mm.
living this ethical life, I think. I mean, in contemporary America, let's say, like, be humble, excuse me, I'm curating my TikTok something or other, I don't know.
Okay,
Right.
so let's now look at some of the individual statements that you wanted to talk about number 50,
Yes, 57
57.
and 52 is actually related to it. So 57 is be open to learning
Mhm.
from whoever has something to teach you.
Yes.
So who determines that another person or another cable TV station has someone to teach us? Everyone who's trying to teach already thinks that they have something to teach us. So, so it must be we ourselves who have to determine whether this person or that person or this TV station or that TV station has something to teach us. So we still kind of risk being in an echo chamber, only receiving teachings from people or TV stations that we already agree with. We haven't broken out of that. And 52 is related to acquire wisdom, listen actively to the words of the wise. If we're determining who is wise, I mean, we all know people who listen to the wrong people, in our opinion.
Yeah,
So let me make some comments. Do you want to look at that?
yeah, for me, you can't determine that they're wise until you hear what they have to say. So it goes both ways.
Or if there's a kernel of wisdom,
I'm sorry, Joel?
or if there's a kernel of wisdom in
Oh.
what they say, there's an insight to be gained from somebody whose point of view you don't fully embrace.
So let me use this as an example of how I changed the text. So this is a statement of Benzoma. This is 50. Which one is that? 57. Statement of Benzoma, mission 41. Yes, as you can see from the fact that 57 through 60 are all from 4:1. He had 4 statements to make. The first statement was Ezahu Chacham, who's wise, Halomeid Mikol Adam, who learns from every person. So that's a little bit unrealistic, because I can't learn from every person, but I made it from every person who has something to teach you. Now, what you're pointing out is that my version of it has a defect, because then I have to decide who has something to teach me. So maybe I have to revise this a little bit. That's the question.
Yeah, I was
Yes.
just gonna add that, it depends how you define learn,
Mhm.
because you can learn something about a person who has nothing certainly intellectual to teach you, and perhaps not even moral to teach you, but you might learn something about the context and what makes them human. Why do they live in a particular,
So you might-
way?
So what you may learn from them is not necessarily something that you want to or can apply in your life. You learn something about their lives. The truth text that Rosenstein gives in initially 4:1 is a verse. Psalm 119 is the Malam Dai is Scouting, which we translate as I have become wise from all those who have taught me. Malam Dai is Scouting. Interestingly enough, I didn't know this beforehand, but interestingly enough, in the Christian Bible, we translate this as I have become wiser than all of you have taught.
Oh,
Very different translation. And that's in the King James Version, and it's repeated in every other version.
Oh,
of
that's a
Christian
good
Bible.
way to
Wow.
discount
That-
Judaism, isn't it?
wiser. That's not what David intends to. So, and I just want to also make comments about 52. There again, my translation is a bit different because in 52 it says that the best thing to do in the presence of sages is shtika, be quiet. And shtika is of course a word which Alan can know, because they always taught how to be quiet, but clearly here it doesn't mean just be quiet.
Yeah.
It means listen attentively,
Yeah.
listen actively. You pick things up from listening, not just from talking. So there again, I changed the text. Yes.
So I just wanted to give an example of the sort of thing I think Michelle was talking about. Sometimes I learn from watching small children. And among the things are when they will be fascinated with something that I would have just passed over. And so I learn from them. There's a bit of wisdom in the way they view the world.
Right.
So I'm just saying that's another way to think about this too, that they're
So Zona's idea that you should listen to, that you can learn from everybody is really true. Okay, yes.
I was gonna say, related to Michelle's comment, my husband had a colleague who used to say, if nothing else, you can always serve as a bad example. And you can actually learn what not to do. It's like.
Other comments about that one? Okay, let's see, anyone have any questions about different ones? Yes,
I'm surprised about how many comment on anger
Yeah,
yes,
and degrees of anger and how to respond or how to not respond.
yes. So that is surprising, I was surprised by that as well. And I'll talk more about that in a while, but in a way, it's not surprising because this was just after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, and the Bar Kokhba revolt, and all of the terrible things that the Romans did, taking people prisoners, putting them into slavery, raping women, murdering people, all sorts of things, all sorts of terrible things were happening. And I sort of feel that this would have been a time when they all had post-traumatic stress. And that the way that manifests itself often is through anger. And so we find in Pirkei Avot a number of Mishnayot that talk about anger and how to deal with it. So you're correct that that's there, and it's surprising that it's there, but on the other hand, it's not so surprising. Rabbi Gamliel, who's one of the leading figures of the generation, who was head of the Sanhedrin. From about 80 to he died in 10 or something like that. He himself was a very angry man. And mistreated two of his senior colleagues in the Sanhedrin. Yeshua ben Hanani and Eliezer ben Yochanan, and mistreated him in a way which was inappropriate. He felt that they were wrong on a certain issue. And he punished them in a certain way which was inappropriate. And the Sanhedrin removed him from office because of his anger. Eventually, they made Elazar ben Azariah head of the Sanhedrin in his place. Eventually, the whole situation was reconciled. But he obviously was a very angry man. Not surprising. His father was beheaded by the Romans in the year 70. He probably had to be sent to exile for 10 years so that they wouldn't catch him that morning. So anger was very much part of their lives. So that is surprising. Other comments that people want to make about specific Mishnah? Yeah.
Isn't Ben Zoma also the one who lost his mind when?
Yes. Yes, so there was the famous story of Arba'ash and Nicholas in the Pardes. One people who went into Pardes, whatever that means. They evidently had some kind of spiritual mystical experience, as a result of which one went to the dead, someone died, Nazai, lost his faith, so Misha ben Bria, and only one that says came in peace and left in peace. That was what they keep. So there was some strange happening. I don't understand what it means. You may very well know that Steiner wrote a novel about this, as a good relief in the 1940s, I think. Died very young. This was his only novel, I think. He died in his 40s. He died in the 40s and in his 40s. So yes, so Ben Zoma apparently did not live long enough to be called rabbi. But his teaching in the beginning of chapter 4 is marvelous teaching anyways.
Yeah, I did read As a Driven Leaf. It's very good. It's a novel based on
Yes.
the Pardes story. So if you combine the two teachings, the Pardes story and what Ben Zoma was angry, because it had a lot of anger. Maybe the teaching of the combination of them is that having a lot of anger leads to you losing your mind.
Ben Zoma did not have anger. It's not what Gamliel had anger.
Oh, okay.
So
So Gamliel is the one whose father had been beheaded.
yes,
Oh,
that
okay.
he was 2 generations old.
Okay, I don't know where, okay, I didn't know how I made the mistake. I lost my head for a minute. So when you constructed number 57,
Yes.
the open to learning and whoever has something to teach you, did you have in mind that you should be listening to opposing opinions just to find out why people have different opinions? Is that part of it?
So I wrote my discussion on that issue a long time ago. I don't remember whether I did that, but I'll go back and look and see what I say about that. Because I think a number of you have said interesting things about that. So let's take it on with that. Anyone have any other Mishnah or any other interesting issues in London? Comment on? I have many that I would comment on.
Yeah.
But,
So many.
So the ones about like 20, make God's will your own will, and there's another one about run to do God's will. I think it's fundamental that we humans perceive things imperfectly, and so therefore thinking we know God's will can be problematic. And-
Yes,
And
yes.
so doing it with zealotry can be a problem.
Exactly.
yes, so that actually, I know did that.
Right.
Talk about that. And I read it yesterday again, so yes, knowing the problem with knowing, trying to do God's will is that you may think that you know God's will and you don't. And so the question is, what kinds of things that you might do because you believe you know God's will that you shouldn't do? So one obviously is to harm other people. And harming other people is certainly not part of God's will. So if you think that that's what God's told you to do, you're mistaken. And there are probably other things that's in that same category. That is a danger, but nevertheless, I mean, for me, this was very important because at some point, I learned that when I was facing an ethical issue, I should say, I would say to myself, what was God wanting to do? Was I acted, did I act according to God's will or not? That I can't promise you. But I do know that, and I remember saying that to one of my daughters when she was a teenager. I said, when I came faced with problems, I asked myself, what did God want me to do? And she said, that's too hard.
Oh, wow.
Interesting comment. Yes.
Well, I think if you want to know God's will, at least in some respects, you can go to the source and read the holiness code, which is in some ways a little more specific at least,
Yes, those are some
right?
of
Like
the-
don't defraud people. That's pretty clear.
Right.
Don't
So-
hate someone.
Right, so we do in fact have some information about what God's will is. Yes, okay, that's certainly true. Okay, I should point out that one verse that's frequently quoted. Let's see, where is it here? Where? So, anyways, the quotes like this, it's from Hosea. Hosea, he says, as God prefers good deeds to sacrifices, and the knowledge of God to the daily offerings. So the notion that we should know God is embedded in the Bible. So, what does it mean to know God? And Maimonides spends a lot of time talking about this, and one thing that he talks about is trying to understand what God's will is for us. So this is somehow a very important feature of the Maimonides perspective of what human beings are supposed to do. So the idea of asking yourself what is God's will is a very traditional thing. It's not something that created for myself, but the Colossians are very clear that obviously anybody in history is limited. People who thought they knew God's will is and tried to get some others.
Discerning God's will is a formidable task, and yet it's not enough. Number 16, make sure that your learning is reflected in your deeds.
Yes. That's something that they're very concerned about. And
As should we all be.
we should all be. And the reason they're very concerned about this belief is because of what we talked about last time we mentioned that one of the new aspects of Judaism at this period was that the importance of rabbinic scholarship. So there were many people who became learned in the Torah, and the question is that enough? And the answer is that no, that's not enough. We're saying over and over again that learning has to be reflected in the way you conduct yourself. Yes. So also, yes.
One of the hard ones is number 45. Include spiritual content, well, for me, like words of Torah in every conversation.
Yes,
Mhm.
that is very hard. In fact, in my notes, next to that one, I said hardest. I wanted to point out that that's very hard to do. If you have a conversation with somebody, the question is, we would like it to have some spiritual value for the two of you. Whatever number there are, and finding a way of incorporating something spiritual into that is challenging. So I sort of think that, for me, it's become easier as I've gotten older, because people keep asking me, how are you? Because I'm old. So it's a natural question to ask somebody who's old. And so my answer is always, well, thank God, things are very.
That's exactly
I'm very grateful for all the things that are working. So that's a little bit of a spiritual conversation, which I'm able to interject into almost any conversation. But I wasn't able to do that years ago, because nobody ever asked me how I was. But you're exactly right. That is one of the hardest ones to do. Any other ones that people would like me to mention? So I'll if not, yes. Go ahead.
Number 9, be sure to take care of your own needs, both physical and spiritual, and be an advocate for yourself.
Yes.
That sounds like the same sentiment that had been expressed by Hillel, which you
Yes.
quoted earlier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Hillel's statement is the most common understanding of Hillel's statement is that you should be an advocate for yourself. You should take care of yourself. If I'm not for myself, then who will be for me? And then the next part is, if I'm only for myself, and what am I? That's number
10.
that's number 10. But it turns out that's not the only interpretation of Hillel's statement. So, for example, the Maimonides' interpretation of Hillel's statement is that only you can take care of your spiritual development. If you don't take care of your spiritual development, you don't make sure that you're an ethical person, no one else is going to do it for you. So therefore, I gave number 11, which was the Maimonidean explanation of what Hillel said. And number 12 is another understanding of what Hillel says, which is you have to take responsibility for your education. If you don't take responsibility for your education, no one else will. And I know this, from my years of teaching mathematics, that a large percentage of the students don't take responsibility for their education. They just go from one class to the next class, to the next class. They do their work, but they don't have a sense of of purpose in what they're doing. They have an overwhelming view of education, which makes them responsible for their education. And so they lose out. And I know, for example, and this connects with another one here, which is Ena by Sean Monet. Someone who's embarrassed to ask questions can't learn. 95% of my students never asked me a question. Not because they knew everything. It's okay. They didn't. They were too embarrassed to ask. Embarrassed either to show their ignorance or embarrassed to ask in front of their co-students. So therefore we have 3 different interpretations of Hillel's statement, and I gave 3 different ethical principles based on those 3 different interpretations. Because which one is correct? Which one did Hillel mean? We don't know. There's no way of telling. And there's a number of them in here which are like that. They're in order to translate what was said into an ethical statement, you actually have to think about different possibilities. The statements that they make in Avot are often too general to be pinned down to one explanation. Yes.
So 55, is challenging for me.
Yes.
Remember that you have the freedom to choose the path that you follow. I'm very grateful to the degree to which I have freedom with where I am. But, given the capabilities I have, etc. And we all have some, within some constraints, some freedom, but many people don't have, they, cannot really make a choice of the path that they wish to take.
Yes, yes, we are very privileged that.
I think you can choose to be ethical or not, though.
True, I see that within
Within
constraints.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And this number 55 is one of those that is directly taught. Freedom of choice is there. And the reason it's here is because Rabbi Akiva mentions it very commonly. We have freedom of choice. We should get to know.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to, can tell a quick little story about number 28. In order to learn, you have to overcome your shyness.
Yes.
Rabbi Silverman of blessed memory once told a story that he was a student of Rabbi Heschel. And Heschel he was so brilliant, but he used to make these dumb mistakes in class. And one day Silverman was with him in his office and said, Rabbi Heschel, surely you knew that. Why did you say that? Why'd you make that mistake? He said, if I can't make a mistake, you can't make a mistake. He said, and if you can't make a mistake, how will you learn? So he would deliberately goof so the students could catch him in his errors.
So I have to tell you my story. Joshua Heschel. I was undergraduate in Columbia, and I used to go to the seminary in the evening for courses. And I had the good fortune of taking a course with Heschel. However, I remember nothing of that course, which is a proof of the statement by George Bernard Shaw, which says that education is wasted on the Okay, let's see what's going on. Let's see here. Okay, so there are many here that I have circled here to make. Let me just do a few more and then I want to do something else. Number 34 and number 38. Number 34 says that the honor of your chaver is due to you as your own. And 38 says that the financial well-being of your chaver is due to you. The language is exactly the same. Right? So, and these two men, the two people who made these two statements, were contemporaries. So you can imagine them sitting in a midrash together, study hall together, trying to understand what verse in the Torah is this. So I'm asking you this question: what verse in the Torah were they trying to figure out?
Love thy neighbor as thyself.
Love your neighbor as yourself. What does it mean to love your neighbor? So one says you should, you should respect your neighbor's honor. You should have his back, so to speak. You should have his back not only in terms of his reputation, but in terms of his financial well-being. So that's how they understood it. And they didn't say love your neighbor. It was not your neighbor. They restricted it to chaver.
Yes.
So they tried to deal with both of those issues, which I mentioned before, were not clear in the biblical text of love your neighbor as yourself. And it's unfortunate that Avot did not lead to a portion of the Talmud, because it would have been very interesting to see how other rabbis in subsequent generations developed this attempt to understand this statement in the Torah. I have lots to say here, but I wanted to go on. So, if we have time, we'll come back to this. So, Pirkei Avot presents many ethical principles, but does not tell us how to incorporate these principles into our own lives. However, Maimonides and other ethical teachers do, of course, address this question. In his discussion of the last part of Mishnah 319, the Rabbi Akiva says that all goes according to the preponderance of one's works. Maimonides points out that even though a gift of 1,000 dinar may be very valuable to the recipient, what is more valuable to the donor is 1,000 gifts of one dinar. Since, quote, by repeating the act of generosity 1,000 times, he establishes a firm tendency with his character. And that, of course, applies more generally. By acting regularly in accordance with an ethical principle, one establishes that principle, they establish that principle as a firm tendency in their characters. In other words, Maimonides' perspective was, and this perspective was embraced by the Musar teachers of subsequent generations, that having affirmed that doing something repetitively, eventually it becomes a tendency in the play. Now, some of the ethical principles lend themselves more easily than others to being reduced to the repetition of simple acts. For example, greeting each person in a friendly way, that can be reduced to greeting each person you encounter in a friendly way. Doing acts of love and kindness can be accomplished by responding to the needs of the people you encounter, by seeking out people in need and helping them in some appropriate way. In our society, people who are in need are hidden away from those who are not in need, but we all really know where they are. If we become aware of our behavior in each of these areas and attempt to modify them on a daily basis, we can change our character to become more generous, more friendly, more caring of others, less angry, in accordance with Maimonides' example. Other ethical principles do not lend themselves as easily to being reduced to a sequence of simple steps. The sequence of steps may vary from one person to another. Nevertheless, if we want to incorporate those ethical principles into our lives, we have to find a way, thoughtfully and deliberately, to develop a plan to implement each principle little by little into our regular activities. Given the number of ethical principles mentioned in the Pirkei Avot, 90, there's some lists which are smallest, or so. But given the number of lists of ethical principles which I've uncovered here, that could be a huge task. So again, follow up Maimonides he says, start with the ethical principle that you most need to work on. Focus on that until you're ready to work on the next ethical principle. So what I did in my book, in this version as well as the later version, is to divide the ethical principles into about a dozen groups of related principles. And for each group, I wrote a kavanah intended to motivate the person who wants to work on that group of ethical principles. Each kavanah begins with the following words. Now, I will actually give you a copy of some of this the first time I want to read it. The following words: Ribono shel olam, the creator and sustainer of the universe, help me find a way, thoughtfully and deliberately, to formulate and implement a sequence of steps that enable me to incorporate the following ethical principles into my life. This kavanah would be followed by one ethical principle, a short list of ethical principles. And whichever principle you focus on, you might recite this kavanah at a fixed time each day, preferably early in the day, try to be aware of ways you can implement that principle in the course of the day. So a critical feature of the kavanah is the phrase, help me find a way, which assumes that there is a way to achieve the goal, and through introspection, you can find that way within yourself. Although you may sometimes need to look beyond yourself to the creator of the universe, or to a higher power with a different name, to help provide you the motivation, the will, the resources, the strength to achieve your goal. So then another important part of the phrase in the Kavanah is that this should be thoughtful and deliberate. You have to be thoughtful, you have to take into consideration your current relationship with that ethical principle, and your own strengths and weaknesses, and it has to be deliberate, so that your thoughtfulness is not abstract, but tending towards a definite plan. And you want to end up with a plan that you followed, that you fully and honestly intend to implement, step by step. Formulating such a plan may not be easy. Saying that you will stop getting angry is not a plan. How will you get yourself to the point where you will get angry less and less frequently? Greeting other people cheerfully, that's easy. You can start off by saying that you will make a conscious effort to say good morning to 3 people who you don't know each day. Eventually, that may become a firm tendency of your character, so that you will eventually greet everyone you come across without having to remind yourself to do so. Doing good deeds may be easy too. Perhaps you are initially willing to commit yourself to volunteering with some organization once a week, or to relieve a caregiver once a week. Perhaps you want to work on humility, in which case you may need to push yourself into situations where you are a little bit humiliated. In the Musar yeshivot in 19th century Europe, what they would do is they would send their students to a bakery, have them ask for nails. Why? So the baker would say to them, "What an idiot you are, you're asking for nails in a bakery." That would provide a little bit of humiliation. So I'm going to give you from this other sheet here, which has 2 examples of groups of ethical principles and how I propose that we use. So these kavanot are not in the present book. I'm giving you a copy of the drafted situation if you want. So it's hard to tell which is the first side. The first side is where it starts out. Let me give 2 examples. Full sheet. That's what I'm talking about. So the first is the group of 3 ethical principles that tell us to resist our tendency to judge. The numbers at the end are this is the numbers at the list that I gave you. So one is give every person the benefit of the doubt. Second is do not judge other people until you've been in their place. And since you cannot have been in their place, you should not be judging them. Third is don't judge other people by external appearances, by first impressions. So let me tell you a story about that. Shortly after, in 1969, my wife and I made a trip to Israel. Shortly after we were married, and I was on a train, and I was talking to a rabbi there. So he, don't think I told you the story. And we had a discussion, Judaism, and then he said to me, "You look like a hippie, you should look like a hippie." So I said to him, "You don't look at the bottle, but it's inside it." I don't remember what his reaction was, but this hippie-like person will be able to quote Pirkei Avot to him must have surprised him at the very least. And so this one, don't judge other people by external appearances or by first impressions, is something that was on the tip of my tongue years ago and came out. Good use of it. So here's how the Kavanah would go. I'm just reading what I read before, but specifically for this example. Avodah Shalom, creator and sustainer of the universe, help me find a way thoughtfully and deliberately to formulate and implement a sequence of steps that will enable me to be less judgmental of other people, to try to see things through their eyes, to avoid jumping to conclusions about them, and to give them the benefit of the doubt, And then I would add a name, and make these so. And in the back of this, I have another one which comes from Ender. I'm not going to do that, you can do that for yourself. And I'll see if you have any other questions, because time is running out. Does anyone have any questions? Questions or comments? Yes.
I like your statement on anger on the back,
Yes.
and I was wondering if you feel it's appropriate to hand this to other people in our life.
Not for distribution.
Oh,
Print it.
oh, yeah. Oh, you're right. The answer is no,
One,
not for distribution.
one academic theory here is don't try to change other people. Change yourself.
I mean, my response to that is just, again, how? You know, I mean, there's no guidance as to how. I've worked on anger a lot in my life. I'm a lot less angry, but you know, it's hard to, it's a struggle to find.
Very hard one to do. Not sure exactly why. Psychologists will tell us why it's so hard to do, but it is very
Very
hard.
hard.
to do.
It's even harder to change other people, but
Yes, and changing other people, they have to move.
Anger has a biological component.
Yes,
No?
and biological.
The adrenaline is undeniable.
Yes,
Right.
that's right. How to be in charge of that adrenaline, and not be in charge of you is the challenge that.
Yeah.
Yes, so as you can see, there are, on the other side, there are 5 ethical principles which discuss anger, which as you pointed out, that's a lot. It's only 100 or so missionaries, 500 discuss anger.
It's a lot. Yeah.
And it's not like they sat down and said, let's discuss anger. These are 5 statements by completely different people, which were put into this collection. So it must have been important to those 5 people. Okay, yes.
I know that in Torah, there's a lot on rewards and curses, but is there anything on cursing? In other words, using curse words in language?
So that's an interesting question because let me put it this way. The Bible talks a lot, we should talk a lot about swearing in God's name. How did the word swear, which has a certain meaning in the Bible, come to mean curse words in English? We don't know how that happens. Because they're not swearing in God's name. Why did they receive the name swearing? I don't know the answer to that question. So whether people were allowed to say normally said words which we would think of as swearing, I don't know. They were certainly much more open to talking about body parts and body functions than we are. So that perhaps is the question, partial answer. Elaborate on that.
But there's, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth? and-
Yes, that
That's
use of the word swearing
Yeah,
is consistent with what's.
Right.
Although it's very clear that in ancient times, swearing by God's name was a serious matter, whereas now it's ordinary. You swear to tell the truth, sure. No big deal. And I'm aware that the results lying under oath is perjury and jail for that. But
But it's
still
not-
the statement of swearing in God's name
It has nothing to do with curses.
It has nothing to do with curses, but it also is not as significant an event as it was in ancient times. So for example, I'll give you the example, if you're going to steal a cherry pie from someone's window, that's theft, that's a bad thing to do. But if you, one way of preventing yourself from doing it is saying, I swear that I will not steal again. Because then if you steal it, you have violated not only the law against theft, you've also violated the commandments against swearing and taking God's name in vain,
Right.
which is much more severe.
And cursing is, in a sense, the invoking of demons. You know,
I don't know, I mean, I think, you know, all sorts of words are considered curse words. But they're not, they're just words which are taboo in our culture, one way or another. They're not curse words or swear words.
but when they are invoking discomfort on another person, like, you know, for example, when you suggest that they do something that's biologically impossible.
I don't,
Or they go to a certain place, you know.
yes, okay, so I think our time is up, so let me just say that this is a good place to end this session. I thank you all for coming and participating in the previous sessions. And I hope that I've provided you as advertised, a fresh look at Pirkei. I would again encourage your friends, please encourage your friends to get copies of my book, or if you want to gift it to them, that would be okay too. I also want to mention that I'm giving a 6-session course in Pirkei during the period between, it's on Zoom, between Pesach and Shavuot, which is the perfect time. 6 sessions on 6 consecutive Wednesday evenings from 7 to 9, starting on the 19th of April. And if you're interested in taking the course is going to be based on reading the book. So you need a couple of books to take the course. But if you sign up on the website, journalist.com, to the course as well. So it's an opportunity to learn some more. So in that course, we can go through the book chapter by chapter and discuss chapter by chapter. So if you're interested in sign up, I encourage you to sign up sometime soon. Those of you who bought a copy, I have your email addresses where I remind you about it.
Yeah, please do.
So unless you don't have reminders. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you for being our teacher.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. I have a little question.
Yes.
How did you reply to your daughter when she said God's will was too difficult? If it's not too personal, if you care,
I don't remember my.
because that was really a moment. Huh? Yeah.
I won't say anything further about her.
No, it doesn't.
That's the question.
No.
I probably said to her, well, they think it's hard to do, and it may be hard to do, but that's the right thing to
Take
do.
this step.
To figure out how we should act in a certain situation by asking what we got and what we do. And I know many times in the book, when you mention things like that, that doesn't depend on your belief in God. You're saying, what would the God who I would believe in if I didn't believe in God want me to do this situation?
Great.
To look outside oneself.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
inspiration is to help us.
Thank you.